I want to talk about a topic I often talk about and a bill to address some problems. Economic development, it's a huge problem. Even some of the Senate Republicans down the hall are starting to realize that the billions we spend on these economic development problems aren't helping. In some ways, they're hurting. And there's no accountability and there's very little transparency. So my bill, I'm going to introduce it later this week, adds accountability and transparency and accountability to our many economic development programs. And what it says is each year, by the first of each year, because our budgets don't run in a calendar year. Our fiscal year is April 1st till March 30th. So each calendar year, by January 1st, the Economic State Development has to report on each program by January 1st and say a number of key statistics and a number of key measurements. And I'm gonna read them out to you. One, they got to say, is this program working? And more specifically, they have to itemize every expenditure. How much on advertising? How much on staff? How much on rent? What was the total economic output of this program? How much economic activity did it produce? Valuable thing to know. How many jobs created? That's a pretty standard metric. Whether the jobs would have been created without the subsidy. Sometimes these jobs were coming anyway, and we throw subsidies at a private company, and then politicians take a bow and say, oh, look at all these jobs I created, but they were coming anyway. So we're going to force them to answer this tough question. Another question is whether any jobs were lost due to this program. You know, we threw billions in state dollars at the chip fab in Malta. Great for Malta, and they'll talk about the jobs created there. But how many jobs from East Fishkill just shifted up the state a little bit to Malta? And I'm not being parochial here saying, hey, give us our jobs back. I'm saying, why are we subsidizing a job that already exists in Fishkill and we subsidize it to move it 100 miles up the state? Doesn't make any sense. Another important metric, cost per job. So the subsidy was spent. How many jobs did it create? You can figure it out with a nice, easy math problem. And that's a really key metric. Sometimes these job creation numbers are like 800,000 subsidy dollars per jobs created. We need to know that for every program. And we shouldn't have to figure it out. Reporters, members of the assembly, the public shouldn't have to figure it out. They should tell us in this report every January whether the job creation goals for this program were met. So they set a goal, we're gonna create X amount of jobs. You know, when the politicians are out there cutting the ribbon and they have the silver shovel in the ground and their hard hat on. Whatever that job number was, did you meet it for that year? We need to know that. Whether there were any clawbacks. Some of our laws, which is good, says, hey, if you don't create the jobs, there's going to be clawbacks. We've seen situations, thanks to comptroller's reports, which say that, hey, they didn't meet their job creation requirement, but we didn't claw back the money anyway. So we didn't follow through with the teeth and the accountability on that program. I also want to know the kinds of jobs. You know, this governor has gotten caught. They made a Spider-Man movie up in Rochester, and there were like 200 jobs created. But when I say job and we say economic development, you and I are thinking about a job, you know, 50,000, 60,000, health care benefits, year-round, permanent, somebody can support a family in New York State on. When economic state development, and this governor and others on both sides of the aisle talk about jobs, they might mean a temporary job for 2 weeks working, building sets for Spider-Man. Now, I'm fine with that. That's good. There's economic development money, but that's not the same as a job that can support a middle-class family here in New York State. And they're different. So we need to differentiate. How many year-round jobs? How many seasonal jobs? How many temp jobs? What's the average salary for all these jobs? What's the average hourly rate? We want to know if we're throwing big bucks, billions of dollars. Are these creating jobs that pay $12 an hour, but we're subsidizing $50 an hour? And that's not an outlandish number. Those are the kind of numbers that have happened. How many of these jobs have health care benefits? And that's a really key metric. If the job has a salary and health care benefits, that's a good job. Maybe the subsidy is worth it. Most of these other ones, part-time, temp, seasonal, they're probably not worth subsidizing. The report is due by January 1st, and here's a couple of keys. By January 15th, there has to be a public hearing. So the report has to come out January 1st. There has to be a public hearing. The head of each of these programs has to answer some questions from the public, from the press, from lawmakers like me, and see if the job is working. And if they don't meet those two requirements, if they don't get the report done by January 1st, and they don't hold a public hearing by January 15th, my bill says we don't fund the program. So if you want your program, you have to fulfill these obligations. They're total common sense. I can't imagine any argument against it. I think most who support this kind of nonsensical spending, they won't argue against it. They'll just avoid the question. We're going to force the issue between now and then. The dates are key because we'll know this information on January 15th if these programs are working. That gives us a good 2.5 months to craft our budget accordingly, get rid of the program, shift the priorities around. All right? This is a key bill. It's going to be one of the cornerstones of this session for me. I'm hoping to get bipartisan support. If not now, with all the boondoggles we know about, when? When are we going to start being good stewards of the taxpayers' money?